How to get reference letters from professors is a question I often get. Another question that I also often get, which is kind of related to it, is how do professors know what kind of personality or traits the student would have, especially if you're in a class of 200, for example. So how to get a reference letter? The easy part that I'm sure all of you would know is just to identify a professor and ask whether or not they'll be willing to write you a reference letter. But the issue with just going forth with any professor that you might have had is whether or not you're confident that the professor can give you a detailed reference letter that kind of shine amongst all the other applicants that are also submitting reference letters. So how do you make sure that the professor will be able to write you a good detailed reference letter? So there are a few tips, some of which I definitely used when I was still a student. So you want to kind of build a relationship with your prof, and especially so if the class or the course that you're in is very large. For example, if the class that you're in is a class of 200, in the instructor's eyes, everyone is just kind of the same because you can't really distinguish student A from student Z. But what you can do is kind of make yourself known to the prof, whether that be asking really good, high quality questions in class. But this might be difficult for some of you who may be more introverted. Another way is to utilize office hours. Don't see office hours as, just a method of asking questions if you have questions. I see it as an opportunity to get to know your prof and as an opportunity for your prof to know you. When I was a student, even though even if I did very well in a course and I knew the content and I didn't really have a question, I still identified which profs in the future I would want reference letters from, and I would go to their office hours and pretend that I had a question or I wanted their insights on something, or I might go to them for career advice. And office hours are often underutilized, so a lot of times profs are sitting in their office hoping students will come knock on their door to ask them questions, but a lot of times students don't come. So take the advantage of that free time to kind of tap into their insights, ask them career-related questions, start building a relationship with them, so that you're known to them, so that when it comes to reference letter season, they're one, not only happy to write you a reference letter, but two, you can be confident that they know who you are. Now, the second question is, sometimes you might only come across the prof once throughout your entire duration of your degree. So how do you make sure the prof continues to remember you? Well, the good thing is if you leave a good, long-lasting relationship with them, they'll remember you forever. They'll be able to recall who you are. Another thing that you can do is even after you finish the course or even after you graduate, shoot them an email every so often to see how they're doing. Tell them how you're doing, because they're probably wondering, I was very close to this student. I wonder what they're doing now, just to keep that, relationship kind of alive, so that when it does come for you to ask for a reference letter in a few years, they can still remember who you are. And then the last question that I want to touch on is, how do professors know what kind of traits and personality you are when it comes to writing reference letters? So in the example of a class of 200, obviously the prof can't know each one of you very well. It is probably a bit easier in a smaller class, for example, less than 70, for example. But normally when if we do get a reference letter request and we say yes, what we could do and what we normally do is we search our email for your name. We look at what kind of grade you got in a course. We look at what kind of correspondence you've had with us in the past, and we start to kind of map out what kind of student you were, and we write our characteristics of you, that profile of you in the reference letter. So be mindful whenever you email a prof for a question, because these are all instances where when it comes to writing a reference letter, the prof will, search your name in their inbox and see, if you've asked high quality questions, if you were someone organized. A good example is, if you often ask questions, 2 hours right before the assignment is due, that sometimes isn't a good indication of organization versus a student who might utilize office hours, who might ask questions well in advance of the assignment being due. So these kind of instances kind of show us what the type of student you were, and normally in recruitment season or in other post-grad applications, that's what they kind of assess the student on. So my tips for all of you to how to get a good reference letter is start building a relationship with your prof. Start utilizing those office hours, ask them good questions, even though you might not have questions. It's just a good way to kind of start building that relationship and getting your name known to them. Potentially you can also ask profs for other insights, for example, how they started their career, if they have affiliations with some organization that you're interested in, ask them what their perspectives is. And also take every opportunity whenever you email your prof as an assessment, as a test, because how well managed you were in an email, how thoughtful you were in your questions are all things that we look at and we kind of assess when it comes to a reference letter. So if you don't have a good relationship with your prof, if your name is not known, then these are things that we would rely upon. So you definitely want to take advantage of those emails and make sure that you're leaving a good long-lasting impression, especially if you're a bit more introverted and you're a bit more shy and you don't want to utilize the other tips on using office hours and building a rapport. Then you definitely want to make sure that whenever you email your prof, you kind of imagine you're emailing a potential hiring manager and make sure that you're leaving a good long-lasting impression.